Good morning, everyone. 17 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to the Sunrise Show. Real fun. We've got Nick Smith on with us. He's the executive director for Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities, and their website, healthyforests.org. And it's a great group surrounding with, great men and women that understand what's going on in this region, and then taking that message to Washington, wherever they have to go, and monitoring what's going on, because quite frankly, it's in the title, Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities. And actually, there should be an equal sign, Healthy Forests equal Healthy Communities. And Nick, it's great to have you on this morning.
It's great to be back on the program. Thanks for having me.
Well, exactly. Now, one of their partners, of course, and completely different, American Forest Resource Council, but their newsletter from the 29th, they really illustrate what's going on. And this is two wilderness bills got hearing. This is on Washington, the Senate, which is very important to what's going on in the West. Talk about that. This Senate Bill 1510 and the Senate bill even more so for the Oregon Wildlands Act 1699. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, there has been a push recently in the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee to look at a number of new land set-asides, new wild and scenic river designations, and Senator Wyden has a couple in the mix, and his bill recently received a hearing, and certainly it's concerning for anybody who I think supports multiple uses and multiple benefits from federal lands. Certainly we have national parks, that they're national monuments, but our feeling is that enough land has been set aside, and it's time, when it comes to our national forests and our ONC forests in Western Oregon, that it's time for these forests to be actively managed for those multiple purposes and multiple benefits. Get people back to work, but also to reduce the risks of catastrophic wildfire, insects, and disease.
Well, insects and disease, and see, this is the thing. Why do we set it aside and then not have active management? If they want to set it aside, show me the work, show me the boots on the ground, that they're out there checking it out and making sure. Because here's the next thing. Under this, the BLM, the recent final proposed resource management plan. Now, Nick, do you know if we have any recourse on this, or this is just coming down home stretch and it's basically done with this proposed resource management plan? What's the latest on that?
Well, the Bureau of Land Management is pushing this resource management plan, and essentially they want to wrap it up before President Obama leaves office.
Right.
So they fast tracked this. I believe I was on your program last year to talk about the plan and the process, and there were opportunities for the public to get engaged and to make comments, and that process ended, and now the BLM has come out with a proposed plan, which is actually worse than the draft plan that we were talking about last year. And currently we're in the objection phase, and so you're starting to see a number of groups, particularly county governments, timber industry, tribes, and others who are registering very deep concerns with the plan that essentially locks up 75% of the land base into reserves.
That's the part, and they admit, the BLM has indicated that 75% of the landscape will be in reserves to protect fish, water, wildlife, and other resource values. 11% more land in reserves in the proposed RMP than the Northwest Forest Plan. So they're going even 11% more, and then they say, under the Northwest Forest Plan, approximately 700,000 acres were available for sustainable harvest. Under the new plan, less than 475. So they're cutting back. But yet this is the weird part. They say, the BLM's own analysis, the Northwest Forest Plan should produce 399 million board feet per year, but we know that we're basically half that at 200 million board feet, even though the forests grow, without question, 1.2 billion board feet a year. Isn't that correct, Nick?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Under the Northwest Forest Plan right now, the BLM is capable of producing 400 million board feet. Certainly they're well short of that, and so they come out with a plan that is slightly above the current meager level, and all of a sudden they're saying that their plan increased timber harvest, and so it's a bit egregious. Really.
It is. And I wonder, I'm not one way or another. I'm saying there is enough for everyone, and we can balance this, and we can all be happy, and especially when you have an industry that provides living wage jobs and everything else, and it's managing these lands, and you're like going, why is it so lopsided? And then you have catastrophic wildfire come through and just clean house. And insult to injury is we have no plan to get back into the woods to help out with any of those burned areas.
Well, we're talking about 2.5 million acres of land in Western Oregon, and there are ways that we could strike a balance between putting folks back to work in the woods and upholding those conservation values. And, I think the plan should be, of particular concern to people in Southwest Oregon, because, a lot of this push for more land set-asides, more reserves are in Southwest Oregon and the coast. For example, the volume, the harvest volume, the forest management activities in the Medford district alone would decrease by 40% if the plan is adopted, and that's just compared to the current meager level. And it's troubling because Southwest Oregon in particular, it's where the dry forests are most vulnerable to wildfire, insects, and disease. It's where our forest products infrastructure is most vulnerable. We've already lost this year the last sawmill in Josephine County, and once you lose that infrastructure, it's not just family wage jobs you're losing. It's the infrastructure you need to maintain the health of our forests, and as we've seen in places like the Southwest, where there are massive forest health problems. Once you lose that infrastructure, it is very difficult to get it going again to remove that excess vegetation in an efficient and effective manner.
Oh, it is. And, so many times, Nick, I use this story. We were driving out to Colorado for a family reunion, and I got within the last 50 miles or so, and I start seeing this brown, and I thought it was a fire. I thought from the distance, I said, well, what is that? And it was this brown that was just all throughout. The trees were still standing, but the brown was there, and I saw it, and it went over a hill and over the next hill and over the next. And of course, I'm in Colorado. I'm in the Rockies here. So these aren't just hills. These are, mountain ranges, and the freeways cutting through there. When I finally stopped, I said, oh, that was the bark beetle. I said, what? So, but then they have no plan to remove the bark beetle. They have no plan to remove the infected timber. Because then they're afraid of erosion. And so it's just going to stand there, and you're going, this is beautiful. You're here in the Colorado Rockies. And then in that particular area and I don't know how much acreage it was, but it just kept going and kept going and kept going. And the people they give you that blank stare like, yeah, I know. I don't want that happening here.
Yeah, well, forest management is a choice, and there are folks who believe that we should let nature take its course with the forests, and folks are entitled to our opinion, and in my opinion, I think there are forests that should be actively managed, to mitigate those risks of wildfire, insects, and disease, and also, providing, that fiber to sustain, our rural communities. And, we've seen the consequences of inaction. Last year we saw over 10 million acres of forests and grasslands burn up. Yesterday, the chief of the Forest Service and the Agriculture Secretary had a press conference where they announced they're expecting another big wildfire season, and once again, as we see these large wildfires, the Forest Service in particular is no longer can no longer afford to suppress them. And so not only are we seeing the impacts on the federal budget, but we're seeing the impacts on the forest as well.
It's amazing. We've got to get to a break, but we've got Nick Smith with us. He's the executive director of Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities, and the website is healthyforests.org. You need to get on there, and you can follow along, and also on Facebook as well. And Nick, when we come back, I want to talk about these two. There's two press releases, one that came out on the 3rd, talking about how, here you go, management in its defunctness, I guess. Elizabeth Burgard as the new Medford district manager for the BLM, but she came from Cedar City, Utah, and I'm wondering, what is Cedar City, Utah has prepared her for this management of Southwest Oregon's forests? And then this press release that came out from the 17th, it's like insult to injury, and the conservation group filed a protest on the 17th about the BLM plan for Western Oregon. They want more setback on rivers and streams. I'm going, wait a minute. Anyway, let's get right back. More with Nick Smith and Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities when we return on News Radio 880 KCMX. Good morning, everyone. 35 minutes after the hour. We're continuing with Nick Smith, and he's the executive director for Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities. The website is healthyforests.org, and a grassroots group. And Nick, you're doing some great work up there, connecting the dots and showing people through factual information what's going on. And it's just astounding. And you go right up into House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and they're clearly getting nowhere. And what's most amazing, and I go back, just like you, Nick, I go back to the ONC Lands Act of 1937. This is what is allowed, and the federal government is not following through on the law. And I'm wondering, I've had this conversation with Congressman Walden. Why aren't we holding the federal government to the job that they agreed to, the deal?
Well, that's a good question. The ONC Act, clearly requires the BLM to manage the land base and to manage these lands for the benefit of the host counties. Some of these counties host as much as 75% of their land base is under federal ownership, and so as far as holding the government accountable, it's a couple of things, and first, it's pretty clear that the resource management plan is illegal, and you've probably already heard that the counties intend to take this to court, and there may be other litigation, and so. The Ninth Circuit has upheld, the dominant use doctrine of the ONC Act, and we expect the courts to uphold that principle in the future. So, there's the court aspect, and of course there's there's the citizen and the voter aspect, and we need to hold our delegations' feet to the fire to remind them this is a pretty important issue. And, we need ultimately some sort of congressional action that sets a path forward.
What's interesting, Nick, is I'm sitting here listening, and this is and the ONC Lands Act of 1937. It is established, it worked, and then, of course, the Environmental Protection, the EPA, and then the Endangered Species Act stopped all of that. Okay, but then you back up and you let people know, if they don't remember, you have Congressmen Walden, Schrader, and DeFazio, and they put together their ONC, their Land Act, and then they spent 2 years on that legislation, and they got it passed in the House, and it died in the Senate. And then all of a sudden, United States Senator Ron Wyden says, well, I'm going to make my own legislation. And he, what he made it? He called it the Land Act of 2013. That's how long we've been messing with this. And you've got counties dying on the vine. Law enforcement can't get paid for. Libraries shutting down. And when we've got in industry out in the woods, and now we're faced with catastrophic wildfire, and they can't pay the government, and you're going, the government is in violation of the law, and we can't get anywhere?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the county funding piece, because I think that's another big issue. You know, for the past decade or so, as timber harvests have dropped on the ONC lands and federal forests in general, Congress has come in with these so-called timber payments. Formally it's called the Secure Rural Schools program.
Garbage.
And it's put our communities and our counties on a roller coaster, year in and year out, whether these payments are going to be renewed. Well, our counties have received the last SRS payment, and it's very doubtful that this program is going to be extended. And so, you have counties that are essentially landlocked, by federal land. They've received their last SRS payment, and now they're looking at a fiscal cliff, literally, where they're going to have to make some very painful decisions. And here we have a resource management plan from the BLM, which is essentially saying, hey, what we're going to give you in the future is going to be an 80% reduction in funding from the historic average. So it's not just timber, it's not just wildfire, it's the services that people depend on every day. It's sheriff deputies, it's roads, and it's other services.
Well, and here's the thing. Josephine County, our sister county to the north, is in the crosshairs of this. And I've had Commissioner Cheryl Walker on, and she said the fiscal cliff is coming in 2017. We've got to make these changes now. And so therein lies the issue. I mean, for anyone, you don't have to go very far and realize that 70% of the land in Josephine County is locked up by the BLM. I told our listeners that we'd talk about this recent change. This is like out of the pan into the fire as far as the Medford district manager for the BLM, because they list from this press release from May 3rd, Elizabeth Burgard as the Medford district manager, but she moved, native of Missouri, she moved to Wyoming to pursue a degree in anthropology, and then she began her federal career in 98 as an archaeology technician. She was in Wyoming, then she went to Cedar City, Utah, and I was looking up Cedar City, Utah, a population of 29,200, and it gets worse because the only forest listed there is the Dixie National Forest, and it's high desert, 5,800. I mean, you're going, what? This makes no sense, Nick.
Well, I saw that press release, and I think that just the most disappointing thing is that, when it comes to, Western Oregon, there's no mention of the ONC lands, the ONC Act, what the special purpose of these lands are. The BLM generally doesn't manage forests. It manages, rangelands and grasslands. And so, I wish her all the best. I take no satisfaction, in bringing criticism to, the men and women in the agency who work in the ground and on the forest.
Right, and I agree with you there. Yeah.
A lot of what we're seeing with the resource management plan, it's coming from the top down. It's coming from bureaucrats in Washington.
Well, and you know what, Nick, you made a good point. I got to cut you off. You made a good point, and I have been face to face with these people. They are passionate. All the rangers, the men and women, the boots on the ground, and I don't say it enough. They do great work, and it's up above them. And you know what? When you ask them pointed questions and you start peeling the layer of the onion off, they're like, they can't say. They would be cutting their nose to spite their face, and they have to just point to the scientific study and the pages after pages. And when you come up with you have to answer the questions for them in the dialogue, and they go, and they cannot say. And so I feel for them in a way.
Yeah, we have great foresters here in Western Oregon, and who do great work. And what we need to do is we need to untie their hands and enable them to manage these lands the way they should. For both the economic, but also the conservation benefits that managed forests can provide.
Well, exactly right. And the next thing is, and Congressman Greg Walden pointed out that the unelected bureaucrats in Washington, 2,000 miles away, are the ones calling the shots and pulling the strings. And let's get these passionate men and women out there and do what they do best. Because, one of the most amazing thing is one of the foresters, he said, Craig, timber has life expectancy. Each species of timber has a life expectancy. We know what it is. We know how long they're going to live. And then you have some of the ones that the old growth. But he said, other than that, the timber is susceptible to disease when they reach the end of their life expectancy. So guess what? And you should farm that out and then replant. And you're like, it makes no sense what's going on.
Well, all you need to do really is go out into the checkerboard of the ONC and look at the Douglas Complex fires. Look at the Stout fires and the others, and you see a stark difference in approaches to how private and federal lands are managed. A lot of these private timberlands in the checkerboard that were burned up have been cleared out and are already in the replanting stage and already in the process of growing new forests, where on the federal side you have snags and essentially fuel for the next fire.
Exactly. And I get frustrated. I get really ramped up on this stuff because I see that people are not being served. I see that good people that have property, that have interest in this, are not being served. And then the folks that, like you said, in the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM that are passionate about this, their hands are tied. And then the legislators, they're not being listened to. They're not being heard on Capitol Hill. And you're going, why are we in this impasse when it could be a vibrant economy? You look at the opportunities, and why aren't we getting anywhere? What can people do, Nick?
Well, they need to contact their elected officials. They need to remind their congressmen and senators that this is a very important issue, not just for jobs, but for, mitigating against, wildfire and also, keeping our forests healthy for recreation. We're in an election year. There's the race for president. The race for the Senate and Congress. And so there are multiple opportunities to get educated about the issues, see where the candidates stand, and to support those who, understand that, we need to bring some management back to our federal lands.
I just wonder, and I brought up, I know I'll take the burden as far as, and I'll give, if Elizabeth Burgad, the Medford district manager wants, and it's not picking on her, it's the selection. It's the fact of, is she the best candidate to manage and work with, Southwest Oregon? And it's clearly she doesn't have the experience. So why would you put someone in a situation like this that she may be experienced in other matters, but you're wondering, okay, why would they do that coming out of the Portland office? And is that just so, she'll just kind of say, nod her head yes and whatever when you're looking at this resource management plan? Is she going to disagree with the resource? And now that she's come in at the 11th hour, she's not going to disagree, right? This is all in play.
Well, that's a good question. I guess we'll see. But once again, we have a plan that's illegal. That hurts our most vulnerable communities, and because it doesn't address the fundamental issues, it's probably never going to be implemented anyway. So, hopefully the new Medford district manager will work with the communities in terms of managing the forests. But, these are pretty serious issues and problems. We're heading into another wildfire season. Lots of issues that need to be worked out. Ultimately, we need our elected officials to step up and provide that path forward that we need.
I know. And, Nick, this is the thing is I think of these good people, these families, these fourth generation Oregonians that are in the outlying areas that love the land, Butte Falls, Prospect, Shady Cove, Grants Pass, Weimer, all up into those, Merlin, all into there, everywhere on this, Southwest Oregon, these beautiful lands. And they love the land and they'll take care of it. And then feels like we get no cooperation and we're left to fend for ourselves. It's frustrating. I know that. And I'm thinking we got to let our elected officials. In fact, folks are so frustrated. It's almost like, how many times do you call? How many times do you write? How many times do you send an email and get nothing?
Well, we have made progress. The ONC Trust Act did pass the House twice. Senator Wyden had his bill, even though there were some issues with that bill. I think there's some general agreement on what's needed to be done, to honor the ONC Act, to provide, the harvest volume that, our forested communities need, to sustain that infrastructure. We just need our delegation to continue working on it, but, if they don't hear about it, then I think they're inclined to work on other issues.
I know. Well, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and Clint Eastwood said it perfectly. He said, they work for us. If you're not going to do your job, we'll find somebody who will,
That's right.
So,
you're absolutely right.
Well, we didn't get a chance to talk about what great things that you're doing with Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities, but we are following along. Let's get together real soon and see if we can't do that.
Sure thing. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Smith with Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities, and get to their website. There's all kinds of information on there, healthyforest.org. We'll put a link up on our Facebook page, and we'll continue the fight. Of course, he's watching his legislation and everything else and what's best for our region. And Nick, thanks again, sir.
Thank you.
All right. We'll get to a break and come right back. More on the